Well, good morning and welcome. It is Tuesday, the 31st of March, our second of our little slots in the morning. So, do welcome you to this time of consideration, this time of reflection, this time when we would consider God speaking to us in His Word, in the Bible. It's another quite bright day out there. It's not as sunny as it was yesterday, but it's dry. So it is another day to appreciate what we have, to enjoy our blessings rather than perhaps lament our lack. But this is a difficult time. It would be well to note that. It's a difficult time if you're on your own. It's a difficult time if you're separated by distance from loved ones. We do pray for you if that's the case for you. But it's also a challenging time for families. It's not easy keeping children occupied and contented under these present restrictions. But folks have been engaged in all manner of activities to do just that, to make the time pass that little bit quicker. But you may have noticed this, but last week these rainbows began appearing in people's windows. And what was going on there is that families were taking this opportunity to engage their children in some sort of distraction, really, some sort of positive work. That they were drawing rainbows, they were putting the rainbows up in their windows. The rainbows were to provide hope. The rainbows were to thank those who are out working and are still engaged in the essential work that must go on even in these difficult and challenging times. And the boys made a couple of rainbows. There's Jacob's rainbow that was in his window, very, very nice. There's Benjamin's rainbow, also a very nice rainbow. Fraser, I don't think he made a rainbow, but maybe we'll get on to him about that. But it is interesting, though, that the image that's used to convey hope and positivity is a sign that speaks to us of the promises of God. If we remember, in our Bibles, we're told that in Genesis 6, mankind's sin was so heinous that the Lord decided to purge the earth of all humanity except for one family. It was the family of Noah who, the text says, found favour with the Lord. So God showed grace to Noah, and he provided a way in which he might escape God's righteous judgment on sin. So Noah, or as our kids' song says, Mr. Noah, he built his ark and he was saved. Now, following the floodwaters receding, this is where we find this sign of hope, this rainbow. God tells Noah that his bow in the cloud is a sign of an agreement. It's a promise, it's a covenant that God made that he would never again judge the earth with the waters of a flood. So this image that folks have been putting up in their windows is an image which speaks of God's grace, his faithfulness, his giving of hope, and his amazing promises. Now, it is true to say that the Bible is a book of God's promises. I read the other day where somebody claimed that there were 3,573 promises in the scriptures. I don't know how they figured that out. They must have presumably sat and counted them, but by any stretch of the imagination, that is a lot of promises. But God does this, doesn't he? He makes promises, and these promises often speak to us of future good things. So remember, after man's disobedience in the Garden of Eden, God hinted that he would act to overcome the fall. He speaks of someone who would come along and strike or crush the head of the serpent, that is the devil. As God's plan of salvation unfolds, the Lord promises Abraham that all families of the earth would be blessed in his lineage. Genesis 18 says all nations, all ethnic groups even, shall be blessed in Abraham. And a number of centuries later, God promises to King David that one in his line, one who will follow him, shall have an everlasting kingdom. And this one's rule of righteousness, his rule of peace, will never end. So when we progress further through the scriptures, we hear of a promise of a new covenant in Jeremiah 31. This one, we're told, shall be different, says God, in that it will be written on your hearts. And by means of this promise, this covenantal agreement, we read on in Jeremiah 31 verse 34 that God will forgive their iniquity and remember our sin no more. So there is this central promise of God weaving its way through the Bible from start to finish. And this promise of one who will crush the serpent's head, this one who will bless the nations, this one who will inherit an everlasting kingdom and fulfill the requirements of the law, this one does show up, doesn't he? His name is Jesus. God's promise is true. He is the great promise keeper. Let me read to you from Galatians 4 verse 4. Paul writes this: when the fullness of time had come, when the time was right, God sent forth his Son, that's Jesus, born of a woman, born under the law, to redeem those who were under the law, so that we might receive adoption as sons. Folks, the rainbow speaks to us of God's promise, but there is another symbol that tells us that we have a God who fulfills his promises. It's the cross. It's the cross of Jesus. For on that cross, all the nations were blessed. The head of the serpent was crushed. The king ascended to his everlasting and eternal throne, and by means of the cross, by means of the cross of Jesus, God could say, I will forgive their iniquity and I will remember their sins no more. The rainbow and the cross tells us that we have a gracious and loving God who keeps his promises. Now today, perhaps more than ever, we could do well to remember and cling to this truth. For this God not only promises to adopt believers into his family, that we might call him Abba Father, but this God promises to stand by us in trouble, in strife, and in difficulty. Let me leave you today with the words that Isaiah wrote. This is chapter 43, verse 2. Isaiah writes this: when you go through deep waters, I will be with you. When you go through rivers of difficulty, you will not drown. When you walk through the fire of oppression, you will not be burned. The flames will not consume you. For I am the Lord your God, the Holy One of Israel, your Saviour. Beloved, you're not going through this river of difficulty alone. The Lord, who is able to accomplish all that he has ever promised, is with you every step of the way.